for public education, K to 12 schools, we are spending approximately $283,000 per year per classroom.
And where did the data come from?
The data came from the Department of Education, specifically their data branch, which is called the National Center for Education Statistics.
First of all, $280,000 for a classroom. Of that $280,000, how much is the teacher making? Do you have that number?
On average,
right.
You're talking about an annualized cost of $110,000 per year to employ a teacher, cost to taxpayers in the U.S., and that misses a few benefits like retirement health care benefits.
Sure.
Across the states, that varies from a low of around $78,000, it's in one of the Dakotas, I think South Dakota, to a high of $140,000 in New York State.
Okay.
Cost to taxpayers.
But the most interesting part of your report to me was some of the questions people, ordinary Americans, could not answer. Like a basic math question using percentages that only 46% got right of, well, you tell me. What was the question?
It's a simple question. This was a test given to a nationally representative sample of American adults. And the question entails calculating how much it's going to cost you to raise your child.
Okay.
So basically,
it's a word problem in math.
It is.
All right.
And it's very simple. It requires basic multiplication. They say, well, if your income is that much, it's going to cost you this portion of your income. And all you have to do is do the simple multiplication. And half of Americans cannot calculate this. People generally know that the United States stacks up very poorly relative to other advanced nations in our education system. In terms of when we take these international tests, given to dozens of nations, we typically score very low. What a lot of people don't know is in fourth grade, we are in the top 15% for reading and for math. So it's not that there's something wrong with the population or the parents, as a lot of people will say, well, I can't solve this if it's a parent's problem. This fall behind relative to other nations is occurring in our schools during the school years, not before.
Well, just to digress a second, Jim, it sounds like if our younger kids are doing so well, this might inform the pre-K debate, the idea that we should pour a lot more money into educating 3-year-old and 4-year-old kids, which would increase a lot more union jobs and stuff like that, and President Obama is for it. In fact, it sounds like our youngest kids are doing pretty well. And so this might argue against the idea that what we really need is pre-K, right?
We have a large federal pre-K program for poor children, which are the people that these advocates at Universal Preschool are saying are being hurt. It's called Head Start. It costs about $9,600 a year to put a child in this preschool program, and by the end of third grade, there are essentially no positive effects left.
Because Head Start's own study showed that by the time they're in third grade, if you have all the kids in the room, you can't tell the difference between which kids had the pre-K Head Start program and which kids didn't have the Head Start program. The differences might have existed a little bit in first grade or something, maybe in kindergarten, they've kind of disappeared by third grade, right?
You can't. There are some very minor effects, some positive, some negative, but overall, there's no clear pattern.
You had this question that American adults were asked about, can you calculate how much carpet is needed for a room? I mean, that's something most people can understand, needing carpet for a room. Can you figure out how much, right? What was that question?
It was something along the lines of a carpet store is holding a sale. This is the price per square yard. This is how big your room is. How many square yards of carpet do you need?
Right.
Okay, and only 18%, again, a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults were able to properly answer that question.
Some people might push back, I guess, and say, oh, what about people that don't speak English? Are they getting asked these questions? Or special needs people, or that kind of thing, that there might be these, reasons why it's not a fair analysis of how well Americans can do simple math. How would you answer that?
There are certain people like that in the U.S. I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but it's certainly not 82% of the American public, right?
Well, some people say, what we need to do is spend more, because if you show that a lot of Americans can't answer basic math questions or, read at a certain proficient level, we need to, quote, fully fund public education. That's the term, which, as far as I can tell, mostly means we need to just spend more than whatever we're spending now.
Like I said, we're spending $283,000 per classroom per year. What's enough? Well, that's a very subjective question, but to give a frame of reference, private schools in this country spend an average of half the cost to educate a public school student. Half the cost, yet when you see studies of what happens when students move from a public school to a private school, you actually see improvements. So you can't say it's not enough money.
Well, let me stop you right there. I know already some people are going to say private schools are super expensive. These elite boarding schools where they play polo and the kids learn how to handle champagne glasses and stuff, where the billionaires send in the Obamas send their
The portion of children who go to those elite schools compared to children who just go to neighborhood Catholic schools, religious schools, and other private schools, it's a very small percentage. Of course, they're in the news because Obama's children go there, and they're elite, and they excel in different things, but the average student in a private school does not go to a school like that. Mm-hmm. Yet they still get phenomenal results, which is why parents are willing to say, I'm paying taxes for the public schools, but I believe so much in this school that I am going to spend more to send my child here. What does that tell you?
What did you find about homeschooled students and how well they do compared to public school students?
On average, the average homeschool student ranks in the top 80%.
80 percentile.
Yeah, excuse me, 80th percentile, the top 20% of students in the U.S. So it has a very high academic level. The problem with homeschool studies is that they don't yet have an experimental study, a good nationally representative one, that shows what happens when children move from a public school to homeschooling. So there may be something innate about the child or the parent that homeschools that makes them...
They would argue a selection bias.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.